Russia is losing. Now, it's obvious. I can't say that because there are numerous reports, and it's true. Russia is losing. Z people, the mill bloggers, they're screaming about that. Oh, we're losing. I tell what they say. I repeat, Russian armed forces basically fallen apart. And Russian state, Putin, is, I used to call it Zugzwang. Now it's the dead end. He needs to do something absolutely radical to change things around.
This is The Global Gambit.
You're watching The Global Gambit. My name's Pyotr, and this is a podcast that looks at the relations of geopolitics, economics, international relations, and right now we are returning to the situation inside Russia, the situation with Vladimir Putin, the situation where there seems to be the ever-growing pressure on Putin's leadership and his grip on power seemingly lessening by the day. And someone who knows this even more than I do is Constantine, someone who has been on the receiving end of a pretty difficult situation from what I gather. And, well, it's good to see him in the flesh, as we saw last week in our previous conversation, part one. This is arguably our part two, but Constantine, it's always a pleasure. I'm glad to see you're in good condition. But tell me, what's actually going on with you and in the context of the Russian state?
First of all, Peter, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. My personal situation is there are two attacks on me, a physical attack and attack on my channel inside Russia. The physical attack, I'm under campaign of pressure, you could call it this way. I'm being followed where I live by operatives of a certain service of a certain country.
Mm.
They have been pushing me pretty hard physically, and I'm having health issues because of that right now. And I'm trying to stay safe at this point. That's my top priority. And my channel inside Russia, that's what I do. My life's work is under attack as well. I have hard evidence. Some experts sent me the evidence that there is a group of certain technicians working against inside Russia, and they're working very successfully. My views are down and all kinds of bad stuff going on. So I'm trying to stay safe. I'm trying to figure out what to do next, where to do next. That's the summary.
I'm very sorry to hear that, but yeah, I mean, when you say physically, like, what's happening? So you're being followed.
I'm followed,
people
yeah,
are
and sometimes they
monitoring
follow
you.
covertly, and sometimes they're in my face and trying to intimidate me, to scare me, which they're pretty successful at.
And so, are you taking the necessary precautions to maybe relocate or to try to find a way to mitigate these people from doing that?
Pyotr, that's something I don't want to speak of publicly.
Mm.
That one day will come, one moment will come, I'll be feeling safe to say everything that is what's going on. I hope that moment will be soon sometimes, but not at this point. So I just want to say that there are a lot of things going on behind the scenes, behind the curtain of inside Russia. Then I can publicly say.
No, for sure. We don't want you to disclose any sensitive or preconditional information that would make you less secure. I guess it's just people obviously watching know you very much for the hard work you've done and the sort of reality that you've brought to them about Russia and the internal dealings of the government and Putin. So I just think people would obviously want to know that you're doing okay. Is there anything particular that people can do to help you? Anything that we can do as viewers, as supporters?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Pyotr, and you're one of the first people who reached out and said, look, anything I can do for you. And I appreciate that very, very much. It's very touching, At this point, if I need anything, I might, and, such as letters of recommendation and so forth. So if I need anything, I would reach out and I'd notify, I'd ask for that. So thank you very much for asking. Sometimes in the future, I might very, very well need some support.
No, for sure. And I'm sure some people watching may have friends or relationships to other people. So always always, be ready to reach out, be available to support Constantine as well. But I guess like your personal situation aside, this is obviously in the context of what is going on inside Russia. The country seems to be on the precipice of an ultimate demise, you could say. But one of the things I've always had a brief reservation about is sort of how many times we can use the word collapse. We've had this debate before, right? But I think the point is that
Yes.
it's all coming to a head. All these different components that are affecting the Russian state as a whole, be them political conflictions, the economic turmoil, foreign policy collapse, all sorts of social upheaval. As someone who monitors it on a much more intricate basis than I do, I look at the macro and mega trends. Like, what's the latest for you from, say, the economic side?
There's so much, not just the economic side is definitely very important, the fundamental, but it's everywhere. Talk about the war in Ukraine, the society, the elites, the economy of Russia. Everything is coming to collapse. Dead end. I would use this word, dead end. It's not moving
Dead
anywhere.
end.
Everything is stopped and it starts falling apart. That's in a collapse. We can say that economy is collapsing because, what is collapse in the first place? It's when basic functions of a state stop functioning, such as public transportation, infrastructure, the utilities and so forth. The roads are not repaired and things like that. And that's exactly what's happening in Russia. Trash doesn't get removed, all those things. I'm not saying everywhere 100%, but, here and there are places where things are really bad and the situation is spreading. People don't get paid. Federal employees don't get paid now, are paid with big delays. This is what's going on. A very interesting situation. I mean, there's so many news that come every single day from Russia that I don't even know where to point you. An interesting event happened 2 days ago. The deputy minister of natural resources of Russia fled to the USA, most likely made a deal with the Americans. Yeah, he wrote a resignation letter, jumped into a car, from what I understand, and drove to, or was chauffeured to Minsk, Belarus, and then took off to America. I mean, how crazy is that? The last defection happened in the USSR, from what I understand. So Russia and the Russians are back into the USSR. And what's very interesting is this guy, his last name was Butsayev, I believe. He was not just your small potatoes official. He was a protege of Oreshkin, Putin's economic advisor. He was protege of one of the federal ministers, and he was the deputy minister himself. He was a big guy, very important in Putin's political system, the vertical of power, defected to America.
Wow. And so, what does that tell us, in your opinion, about Putin's state on power, grip on power?
Losing. His power is slipping through his fingers. He controls the situation less and less now. Look at two huge disasters happening, Tuapse and Perm. There have been numerous attacks on oil refinery and a big production plant, oil refinery in Tuapse and production plant in Perm. Huge fires, oil contamination everywhere. Putin silent. That's not how you handle emergency situations in your country. The entire country is talking about that. The social media are full of videos how people suffer, how the Black Sea is contaminated with oil. It's literally covered with thick layer of oil. Putin is silent as if nothing's going on. And the Russian propaganda is silent about that. There is open dissent against Vladimir Putin. Ilya Remeslo, his former strong loyalist, he's interviewer. He interviewed Putin personally. The guy who destroyed Navalny's reputation, made fakes about Navalny when he still was in Russia. Basically, Navalny is dead also because of Ilya Remeslo. He turncoated. And now he's blaming Putin for everything, and he's calling for Putin. He's basically calling for a coup, and he gives out interviews left and right saying that, you know what, very soon Putin, will be out, and this is open, publicly happening in Russia. It just tells us one thing: very strong signal that Putin is losing his power.
Yeah, and obviously the growing discontent within the country used to be relatively minor, or it was quite suppressed, wasn't it? You wouldn't see much public criticism, especially amongst like Telegram channels or military bloggers or the mainstream media or whatever on RT and the sort of the talk shows. But now you're seeing that on a regular basis, aren't you? You're seeing it almost on a daily basis.
Massively, hundreds, thousands of different videos people make, post, and they openly blame the government. They blame Putin. It seems like 4.5 years after the tragedy happened, after Russia invaded Ukraine, they start waking up and voicing their concerns, some voicing their outrage. Another interesting thing is happening, a massive wave of immigration. Another one. The last wave was in September, October, November 2022. Immigration was happening for about 3 years, but then now it's intensified. Okay, now tons of small businesses closed their doors. The new tax reform is simply killing them, and there are tens of thousands companies closing. Literally, I have some insight from one of the federal ministries in charge of the statistics, and someone there told me that they are not allowed to release the real numbers of businesses closing in Russia because the numbers are scary. But from what we see, if you go to any major city in Russia right now, you go on the main street, you will see a pretty scary picture of just closed the stores that are closed down. Big shopping malls are empty, no people, no businesses. Anyway, massive wave of immigration. People come even here to Uzbekistan, they scout. People I know personally came out of the blue, paid me visits, and every time I asked, like, what are you doing here? We're just looking around. But I know that they closed their businesses back in Rostov and Moscow and Novosibirsk, and I know that they're looking what to do next. So they come to check Uzbekistan, how is it for the families, for the kids, and things like that, because not much known for Uzbekistan about Uzbekistan. And they also look for other places as well: Serbia, Portugal, Spain. Spain is very popular right now. Thailand is too exotic. Vietnam, too exotic, but a lot of Russians go there. Bali and places like that. So I think it's a honorable mention of what's going on. One of the trends, big trends happening in Russia right now.
But how does it compare depending upon which city or region or oblast you're talking about? Developments in Moscow will be different to St. Petersburg, to be different to Yekaterinburg or Novosibirsk. So does it depend what kind of business they're in, where they're based in Russia, or it doesn't really matter so much? The
Places
nuances,
are
because the whole
closing all
state
over
is
Russia. Even
right.
Moscow is affected. Moscow, St. Petersburg, very affected, okay? There are two biggest drivers for this. First is the new tax system that's been in Russia implemented since January 1st of this year.
Right.
It's simply killing small and medium-sized businesses. And the second big problem, even bigger than taxes, is disposable income of Russian people has been dropping. And now it's to the point where they start pinching pennies even on their food. Okay, a lot of them can't afford anything else. So these two drivers of pressure, they result in businesses just closing. And the owners of small businesses in Russia, they're very active, very energetic, brave people, risk takers, and they close down their business. What to do next? They can't open anything else. Okay, it's not 2021 anymore. So they just get up and go to a place where they are welcomed, where they can trust the government for a stable, normal taxation system, for where they can find good markets and try to settle there and do business there. So Russia is losing the best of the best right now.
Well, there's always been a concern about brain drain in the former Soviet Union states. And certainly now with the war in Ukraine, that led to good 10% of the population more leaving or fleeing. But with Russia, it's always been a systemic challenge, isn't it? Trying to stem the flow of especially younger generational Russians or higher educated Russians or highly skilled, like, in engineering or STEM subjects from leaving the country. When Putin introduced the conscription and what he called partial, which was obviously general mobilization of upwards of 500,000. That led to the mass movements of people into Uzbekistan, Georgia, Armenia, lots of surrounding former states. So how do you think this set of immigration right now compares to what we saw 3.5 years ago?
Well, I was a part of that wave of immigration. I left Russia on 27th of September of 2022, and I had only 36 hours to pack and basically leave everything behind, not to ever
Wow.
come back to Russia. So I know quite well, Pyotr. I witnessed it. I witnessed thousands of men trying to get out of Russia in Sheremetyevo, Domodedovo. I personally flew out of Russia through Domodedovo airport. I witnessed tens of thousands in Uzbekistan, in Tajikistan, where I initially landed, and then I walked to Uzbekistan, and I saw thousands of men, just like me, middle-aged men, walking towards Uzbekistan. So I know quite well what happened 3.5 years ago. This is different. Back then, most of us only had hours. I had 36 hours. Some people had a little more, some a little less. Basically, we just packed everything we could fit into our backpacks and luggages and would leave, not knowing where we were going. Each one of us took a leap of faith. Okay, because our purpose, our goal was to get out of Russia. Everything else was not so important, okay? Once we got out of Russia, we started thinking, what do we do next? And then that when was depression set, and the anger and hopelessness and all this. It was a very tough year for all of us, and that's why I established Tashkent Breakfast Club here in Uzbekistan. It's a support group for Russians and Ukrainians who fled, and I also founded Brain Drain Unlimited Foundation. That's a nonprofit based in the USA to help Russians and Ukrainians to relocate and find a new home in America.
Wow.
I know that way. This is different. Right now, people are not in a rush. They're trying, like just as I said a few minutes ago, they scout, they research, they make rational decisions. They sell everything in Russia. They prepare their departure. And what's even most important, they prepare their arrival. Okay. They know which schools they're going to give their kids to. They know how they're going to make money. We didn't know anything. We were just lucky, so that let us out. And these people, they're planning their entire lives outside Russia, for the rest of their lives, basically. So this is a much slower wave of migration, but it's massive. In my opinion, it's going to millions of Russian families mostly.
Yeah, it's a slower burn, isn't it, this time round? But it's going to be even bigger in terms of quantity.
Just like in the 90s, you witnessed it also. In the 90s, there was a massive, slow but massive wave of people leaving Russia. Okay, and it lasted for over 10 years. Now I think this one is going to be much longer and much more massive, but it's going to be as slow. It's, of course, if they don't announce like the general mobilization, I expect they will. And if that happens, then there will be another condensed wave of people running away from Russia, basically.
And what does that tell you about the conditions on the battlefield then? I know you're not purely a military analyst per se.
Dead end. Russia is losing. Now, it's obvious. I can't say that because there are numerous reports, and it's true. Russia is losing. The people, the mill bloggers, they're screaming about that. Oh, we're losing. I tell what they say. I repeat. Russian armed forces basically fallen apart. And Russian state, Putin, is, I used to call it Zugzwang. Now it's the dead end. He needs to do something absolutely radical to change things around. And that such radical thing could be another big mobilization, putting all, not just military mobilization, but putting Russian economy onto military tracks completely, creating planned economy just like in the USSR, perhaps announcing the war officially, because right now there's no war. There's just a special military operation. And basically gearing the entire country towards the war life, the economy, the society, the whole 9 yards. So that Putin can try. Well,
But how
the
much further can
chances,
how much further can the Russian economy go, though? It is basically in a complete wartime footing. So how much more spare capacity is there? That's a key economic concept of spare capacity. How much more is there of that left to really reorientate the economy even more than it already is? If you're spending $140 billion, which is double what the Russian state normally spends, and I can't see how much more money they've got to give, right?
it's not about how much more left, how much more they can give. It's about who owns, who makes economic decisions, who decides what to produce and how much to sell at. Just to give you an example, all right, Russian oil refining industry has been under tremendous stress since last August, when the first Ukrainian strikes on Russian oil refineries started happening on a regular basis. Okay, so right now we're at the point where attacks happen every night. They cause lots of damage. Tuapse, the entire city is covered with basically clouds of oil in the air, oil spray. Everything is on fire. It's a catastrophe. Obviously, right now there's a shortage of oil refined products, gasoline, diesel fuel. So the country has seized control over a decision of which oil refineries produce what, how much, and what they sell. That's planned economy. That's the USSR. So they stripped oil refineries of economic sovereignty. So they can't make business decisions anymore. They just must follow state orders. I think that is the first step. And that is going to spread onto the other parts of the economy: agriculture, production, civic production, not just military production, everything. Right now, there are still private businesses, owners of small, medium, and large companies. They still make their own independent business decisions. So the state wants to change that. I think that's where we should be looking at.
Okay. So what do you think that would mean? How would that play out in your mind?
Not well. We're both economists. We know how planned economies play out. It is going to be absolute worst disaster for not just for the economy, but for the entire country. But the thing is, I think that they will try to do that because Putin, he's a dead end. He's a cornered, bleeding animal. He's got to try to do something. Perhaps he'll try to start a new war. He'll try to invade one of the Baltic states. Right now, there's much talk about it. Not much I can say because I'm not an expert, but there's definitely a massive way of rumors about that.
How does that?
If they're talking about it, it means that they have some basis.
But how does that work? If I'm going to use a typical anti-Western argument here, but how can Russia invade the Baltic states if it can't even win in Ukraine? How is Russia a threat to Europe if it can't even manage Ukraine?
They can attack. I mean, if you look at the maps of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they're fairly small countries geographically. And to attack them, Russia needs permission of the United States. Donald Trump must give guarantees that he would not, basically, he would have to give a blessing to Putin. Because without that, Putin won't do anything, obviously.
Okay. I mean, America's pulling out 5,000 troops from Germany. There's a lot of alarmism around that because of the sort of, well, it sounds like a big deal, right? 5,000 troops, but you've got 40,000 plus, and ultimately the administrative and logistical complications of withdrawing them isn't going to happen overnight. So realistically, it's going to happen within a year. But Trump's going to be affected in the midterms, and ultimately, then he's only got 12 months left in office. The point being is that while it sounds pretty bad to pull 5,000 troops out of Germany, one, it only harms America's interests more than Germany's. Two, by the time it's actually in place, the implications are minimal and will probably be reversed by the person who comes back in. Let's say it's a Democrat, they're going to probably reverse that. So there's a lot of alarmism about this, but in the real world, it's not that simple, right? So can you still say that even if America gives Russia the green light, it's as simple as just going in?
Absolutely. I think that's fairly simple. What you are assessing the situation at I would say the old angle. In the past, before Donald Trump, what you're saying would absolutely be 100% true. But right now, it's not a matter of not having US troops on the ground in Germany, in Europe, on European soil. Let's say that Donald Trump makes a secret deal with Putin, says, you know what, go get them. I'm going to teach them a lesson by your hands because, and then Russia invades. It can invade in different ways. Doesn't have to send troops. It can start bombing, anything. And then the troops that still remain in Germany, well, if they remain, they don't move. And the Article 5 is invoked, and the United States just vetoes it. That's one scenario for you. And Donald Trump says, well, you know what? That's not my problem. That's yours. You deal with that.
Yeah, no,
Is
don't
this
get
a
me wrong. I'm
possible scenario?
not minimizing the possibility of Putin wanting to take some kind of assault on Eastern Europe. It's more just this specific headline that has captured a lot of people's attention and making everybody agitated is more complicated than simply just pulling out a bunch of people. There's a lot of technical details that require it to go through. But no, certainly the eastern flank around the Baltics is arguably NATO's Achilles heel, isn't it? That's why they set up this whole Eastern Sentinel idea, and the UK's been leading a lot of, I think, training. I'm here in Romania at the moment, and there was some important exercises done here late in December. But yeah, I mean, so you think that Putin would go as crazy as to just launch an attack on Europe and see how it goes?
I don't think that. I think there's definitely a possibility. And the situation in the Kremlin, I see it's very dynamic. It changes every day. It depends. There are so many variables. America, Donald Trump. And in America, it's not just Donald Trump. There are other players as well. He's just the biggest and the most important one. The allies, well, not too many left, but still, there are. India and China, Russia would have to get theirs authorization, at least China's, in one way or another, because China is a huge influence on Russia. If China pulls a plug on support, Russia is basically done. There are so many things, and then the domestic situation, political situation, the war of the clans that is happening right now, the war inside the KGB. There are different parts of the KGB that are clashing inside the service. The war between the oligarchs and the KGB, and it's very interesting. Okay, that's so dynamic. And will Putin invade? I don't know. There is a possibility, and that's something. There is a way out of the situation for him, but it could lead to a complete another catastrophe. Okay, because who knows? European countries might unite and say, well, you know what? America is not helping us. We're going to do it ourselves. And I hope they do that. I hope they unite. I hope that NATO doesn't fall apart. Okay, and I certainly don't want Putin to invade any other countries. In Russia, it's called the second front, Второй front, this situation. And it's the talk of the town. Will he announce the second front or not? That's what they're discussing right now. But so I don't know. But
No.
there's a possibility. And I foresee that this might happen. Okay?
Yeah.
So I don't rule it out.
Well, there's always a possibility of anything to happen, isn't it, really?
Just
There is a
probability,
concept of-
that's what matters.
Yeah. There's a concept of NATO minus, which is basically just NATO without the United States. And, there's a lot of emphasis in the UK, at least, because the UK is much more hawkish on Russia, I think, than other parts of Europe, for example. And this idea that, Ukraine can replace America in some ways, not in military capacity, but simply in innovation, in a willingness to stand up to threats or relative risks that face the continent. So there's a lot of talk in Europe as well about NATO without America, or just surviving without any major power, which I'm very, very fixated on as well. Europe needs to be a lot more independent and autonomous of anyone, not just America, but also China, Russia, India, anyone. We need to be being a lot more willing to forge our own path. But I guess one of the last things I was kind of interested in was, of course, VD is coming up, Victory Day. And I made a video on this, which I will link in the description for people. But simply, this is going to be a very scaled back parade. There's not going to be any tanks or heavy industry, apparently heavy industrial equipment there. Troop numbers are going to be severely reduced. What's the point in having a Victory Day parade if there's nothing to parade?
Well, it's a huge symbol. It's a huge symbol for Putin. Because if you remember, after the USSR fell apart, the parades just stopped. And the last one was in 1991. I watched that. I was still a teenager. And the next parade after that was... but it was just one-time event because it was a 50-year anniversary of victory over Nazism. And the next parade, in its current form, with armor and all this grotesque parading and all of that, flags, happened, I believe, 2006. And that was the laying the foundation of the new ideology. We can do that again. We can repeat. Okay, that's what they kept on saying after that. Putin and his people have made it an incredibly inflated symbol of the regime. Okay, the symbol of strength, the symbol of military might, and they used it for all these 4 years of the war. And each parade in 2022, 23, 25 was, for goodness sake, it was the biggest parade ever, I believe, since the USSR, and 27 presidents of different countries, including 2 presidents of the European Union countries, visited, mingled with Putin, shook his hands. That was his geopolitical victory. And now, Russians are so conditioned to see the V-Day parade. They are so conditioned to see the Topol M, big nuclear missiles, getting through the Red Square. To them, it's like a huge symbol of Russia is mighty and powerful again. And all of a sudden, Putin cancels the parade. What kind of message it sends to regular Russians?
On top of everything else as well.
I don't even know. It's a shame, basically. To them, it's a shame. We lost? Why there's no armor? Where are all this marvelous, wonderful Armata tanks and all of that, So what the hell is going on is the question that everyone is asking right now. And by the way, that scaling down is just the rumors at this point. The only fact is that the internet users received notification from internet providers in Moscow saying that there will be no internet whatsoever, Wi-Fi, through wires, mobile internet, for basically until May 10th. So that's the proof that they're scaling down the parade. They're basically taking extra measures against drone attacks. That's what we know so far. But of course, the rumors are running wild. For some time, they were saying that parade would be canceled completely, and now they're saying that there'll be just some troops marching without armor. So, Pyotr, that's another sign of collapse of Putin's regime. It's another sign he's in complete dead end. Because if there was a slightest chance of getting this parade through successfully again without any attacks, he would certainly do that. But he's not sure. He's scared. Okay, that's what we are seeing. And the signal that is sent to the Russians, I don't know, this is the end. That's basically what it is.
Well, it's that coupled with the complete deterioration of Russia's activities in Mali and the Sahel in Africa as well is rather entertaining to watch. All this celebration around the removal, rejection of France and the Western coalition for Wagner to come in, and then that to become Africa Corps. But Africa Corps is a complete joke, and I think a demonstration, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, an illustration that Russia's foreign policy is also completely lost its way. As we started off this conversation, any of us watching, what we can do to help you, do drop your comments below, giving your solidarity with Constantine. But also, if you've got any suggestions or help, then do get in touch.
Couple of notes. First of all, I hope that you like my T-shirt.
I had noticed it. Yes, you normally wear like a polo top or something. So I did notice this was quite a particular choice of clothing from you. Yes.
Let the swan dance. You know what the swan dance is, right?
Well, I did ballet, so I'm familiar with it, yeah.
Every time that General Secretary of the USSR died, they would shut off all communication. They would shut off TV stations, and the only thing on TV broadcasted was the ballet, the swan dance. That's it. So we're all waiting for this ballet to be shown on Russian TVs again. Okay. So, friends, if you like my T-shirt, please hit the like button right now, like this broadcast, because I certainly like it, and I'm waiting for this event to happen. I'm looking forward to it very much. And the second announcement, Pyotr, I'd like to invite you to my channel again in a week or so. Let's talk about what is happening in Russia through the eyes of a person who knows Russia well, but is a Westerner. Okay, I think that's going to be very interesting for my viewers.
All right. I'd be happy to join you again, and thank you for the invitation. Well, there you go, guys. Do subscribe, like the video, follow, whatever, ring the bell for part 3.
Excellent.
Part 3. We'll just continue having parts to follow up on Constantine.
And let the dance swan too. Let the swan dance too.
Yeah, well, I'll have to grab one of those T-shirts actually from you, and then we can wear it together. But everyone watching, thank you so much as always. We'll see you in the next one, and stay safe out there, especially to you, Constantine. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.